Now, Nietzsche's work, given that he writes about morality in a wide range of his texts, early text on to its sort of much more mature, sort of in the text of his more mature phase, his core text, where he really fleshes out these themes. So often the targets of his critique of morality in a pejorative sense seems to sort of attack a number of different aspects of moralities in a pejorative sense. For example, in some cases, he seems to be targeting the specific content of such moralities, their sort of antagonism to excellence, he argues, their endorsement of pity or selflessness, forgiveness, and all of that. Their sort of leveling tendency, their sort of herd mentality. So the specific contents of these different uh, exemplars of morality in a pejorative sense, whether it's Christian morality or utilitarian morality, etc., the specific contents of these moral systems that he's criticizing. At the same time, as we noticed in the last lecture, a big aspect of, a big target of his critique is just the teasing out where these moral systems emerge from. The origins, a genesis, the historical origins, a genesis of morality in a pejorative sense, which he argues grows out of ressentiment or resentment. This particular, as we talked about last time, sort of this repressed, embittered hatred towards that are suppressed and that only take on a form of psychological moral victory. At other times, something that we'll explore today, his critique seems to be directed at the assumptions underlying the presuppositions of morality in a pejorative sense that seem to assume certain attributes of human beings, that they exercise autonomy or freedom or agency, and therefore can take on responsibility for their actions. They can be blamed. Either we can talk about the guilt of individual agents and so on. So he's going to Nietzsche's, as we'll see today, Nietzsche's critique is going to be directed at some of these assumptions underlying the agents of moral behavior and moral actions and moral sentiments and so on. And finally, his critique seems to be directed towards this universal idea of these moralities, of morality in a pejorative sense, this universal idea that one moral conduct is appropriate for everyone, without exception, as we saw, for example, in Kant. So, in other words, in short, depending on what part we are reading, often within the same text, and depending on different texts also, it seems to be a sort of moving target. Sometimes he's criticizing specific uh, moralities, specific behavior and action that are regarded as moral by these different theories. Other times he seems to be criticizing the fact that all of these moralities emerge out of this sort of embittered form of resentment uh, towards the higher types that he extols. Other times he seems to be criticizing the assumptions that underlie these moral systems. And then finally, a large part of his critique seems to be directed at this idea that you have a one shoe fits all, one moral system, one moral code of conduct that we can use to evaluate the behavior of all human beings in all times, in all places, and so on, and in Kantian terms, so long as we're dealing with all rational beings. In Bentham's terms, so long as we're dealing with all beings that can feel pleasure and pain. So, in different ways, this universality that's imposed on all sort of targets of moral behavior and action. Now, according to Nietzsche, all the normative systems that are subject of his critique that are following Brian Leiter, we're referring to as morality in pejorative sense. that they all share certain characteristics, certain structural characteristics, which are then broken down into sort of their descriptive elements and their normative elements. Uh, when we turn to the descriptive components, the idea here is that all of these moral systems or normative systems, all morality in a pejorative sense, presuppose certain understanding or certain descriptive account of human beings or human agency. In the sense that for the normative claims that these different moral systems will make, whether Kantian, utilitarian, etc., and so on, in order for those normative claims to hold, certain ideas, certain sort of descriptive ideas, certain empirical claims of what human agency is or how human agency operates have to hold true. Or another way to put it is all of these normative systems rely on certain sort of basic assumptions about human agency. To begin with, that human beings are autonomous and act out of their own free will. So that's sort of the first assumption, this concept of free will. There's another sort of underlying descriptive concept of the so called transparency of the self, that we can actually uh, trace and figure out the motives that lie behind a person's actions, that the individual self is transparent so that their motives become apparent in their actions. And the third is this assumption of the similarity or universality of all people. That all people are the same, so that we can talk about one moral code for all. So these three are like three descriptive components that have to hold for much of these moral systems to then make the types of normative claims that they do. This concept of the free will, this no concept of the transparency of the self, and this notion of the universality of all people. These three descriptive claims, these are at a very empirical level. We can test out to see whether these are true or not, but these are necessary for them then to make the claims, normative claims that they do, whether it's duty-based or utilitarian claims and so on. And there, Nietzsche's main critique is that all morality in a pejorative sense, all these normative systems, embrace or propose the types of norms which favor the interests of some at the expense of others. That they all, more specifically, they all embrace norms that harm the highest human beings while benefiting the lowest or the basest human beings. So this is going to be sort of his main claim. But in order to make this claim, he's first going to show that underlying these claims are certain certain descriptions of human beings, which he'll then try to show are also faulty. So let's maybe spend a couple of minutes on what connects these two. As I've already hinted at it. In Nietzsche's view, the conjunction or connection of the descriptive and normative components arises from the fact that Nietzsche believes, that a person's views can only be explained by natural facts about that person. What does that mean? More precisely, human agents typically hold any belief, or rather, whatever belief they hold those because it favors or supports the type of life those agents are capable of living. Now, let me break that down. In other words, Nietzsche claims that human beings or human agents hold on to sort of particular philosophical or even metaphysical views about themselves and their existence and all because they support their moral beliefs. Or another way to put it, or take it further, and human agents hold those particular moral beliefs because they favor the interests of those agents. So he intrinsically links the descriptive and normative components in the sense that whatever moral beliefs that a human agent has, an individual has, are moral beliefs that favor their own position or their own interests. And these moral beliefs are based on their particular specific circumstances in life and so on. These moral beliefs are based on the certain circumstances of their lives, which give rise to certain views they have about themselves. So, what they think about themselves based on their conditions in life are closely interlinked to the moral beliefs that they hold, which are closely interlinked to the interests they have in pursuit of their lives. So Nietzsche thinks that agents will typically believe in the sorts of metaphysical or empirical claims only when the normative agenda of that moral claim serves their interests. So it also becomes clear, however, that for Nietzsche, what ultimately defines this morality in a pejorative sense, uh, again, sort of the type of morality he's more in favor of, is this distinctive normative agenda. And this is what really matters, that ultimately it is not the sort of falseness of the descriptive claims, which he will proceed to show, that lies at the heart of the problem. The crux of the problem lies in these distinctive normative commitments that individuals have. And Nietzsche is making the claims those distinctive normative agenda that individuals have are based on sort of the types of persons they are. Now, first spend a little bit of time on these descriptive components before turning to his critique of the normative components.